Good morning, afternoon, bonjour. My name is Taryn Chapman, and I'm going to be your tour guide for the Champs-Élysées tour. I'm probably saying that incorrectly, Champs-Élysées tour. I wanted to do a video because I wanted to do different mediums because I do believe that different mediums and forms of communication help really reveal the beauty and when you do something like a project or any type of endeavor really. So I wanted to do a video for the purposes of a reflection of how I felt when I went on this tour, the Champs-Élysées tour in the 8th arrondissement. So I did this tour with Asile Patton, and together we did this entire tour. At first, we didn't listen to Kashana, and we thought that we were going to be able to just tackle this tour in one day. But after getting there and after getting through this video, you'll understand that it was just a long, very tedious process. So the first thing that was really interesting about this tour is if I can pinpoint where the start was right here, it was very difficult to determine where we were at and what is the true starting point. I remember that one of the things that was really challenging was, okay, so we have this map, where exactly are we going? So one of the first things we did was try to ask individuals on the street next to the tall Egyptian structure that stood very tall, the obelisk or something like that. And then we made our way to like one of the embassy doors, the US embassy doors in Assal, and I realized we're in the wrong place, wrong time, and we need to get to the right part of the tour. And then we were able to figure out that the park that's right off of the Concord, right in front of the Palace de Concord and the big Egyptian monument and the Ferris wheel, that's where we realized that we had to go first. So we went there and we did our thing and we went through the park. And I'm gonna put a lot of pictures after this video so that you can visually see some of the things that we saw. But here's some highlights of me and Nasile once we made it into the park. Here's one example of a picture of us looking very crazy. That's right next to the Gabriel Pavilion. That was kind of off of the park once we got there. Some other highlights is we just kept going, and then there was this famous theater, and it's somewhere in the notes as well that we had, or the booklet that we got via Study SU Abroad. The Theater des Champs-Élysées is one of the many theaters that we saw on our way there, and then the front of the Theater Margini Theater. This is what this one is. Here's a style in front of that. It's kind of hard to see, but don't worry because all of these pictures for the virtual tour are going to be embedded in the next slides to follow, so don't you worry about that. But as I'm loading some of the pictures, one of the interesting things about this tour was how vast it was and how long it was. After we went through the park, and here's a couple more pictures of, going to a studio that was just right outside of the park, and so on and so forth. After doing most of that, here's a studio, we realized that it was a lot of ground to cover. We first made our way outside of the park, and that took us a good 20 minutes on itself because we're stopping, we're taking pictures, we're monitoring this experience. Here's kind of a couple pictures of me that I took in front of, it's kind of hard to see, but the gate, I think it was the gate of one of the embassies or where the ambassadors kind of occupy. And there was a lot of guards there. One thing that we noticed was there were a lot of guards with guns that were all around the area trying to just make sure that everything was safe and intact. We make our way out of that park and then we go to where the statue monument of Charles de Gaulle is. And y'all know I love me some Charles de Gaulle. Here's me sitting next to the famous Charles de Gaulle statue. Charles de Gaulle's lit. Keep an eye out on him. He's gonna be a big blow up in this world one day. But once we start going through the different areas of the tour that you'll see later on in pictures, one of the things that I noticed is we come out of the park, we're going into really, really rich neighborhoods. The neighborhoods themselves have very different aspects of Givenchy dresses, fancy stores. As I was talking about how much that she wanted to go in some of these stores, and it started getting darker and darker at night. And then we get to a destination um, where we get to the cathedral that I want to pinpoint. Once the picture loads up, I'm going to show exactly what it looked like. But here's one of the cathedral spots that we stopped at as well. And that cathedral spot was a beautiful, beautiful cathedral connected to this beautiful church. And here is a somewhat blurry but better picture of a silent eye standing next to that cathedral itself. Kind of nice. And once we were getting there, it was, yeah, like I said, it was getting darker. We're passing we're going in between areas of, like, I would say, upper class, like middle upper class, to even remotely higher classes. And I make that distinction because I'm looking at these stores and seeing how the stores and these places are getting more and more pricier, more and more security stacked up. We passed by the Four Seasons. We passed down the Prince de Galles. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. A hotel right there, and it's getting more and more poppin'. And then after we find our way beyond that point, we're just continuing on this tour to find other hot spots. And eventually we start realizing that, like, wow, Kashana was right. This tour is very, very a lot of ground to cover. And we get probably, I would say, we starting right here. I don't know if you guys can see that. We're starting, no, sorry, right here. We're going along these tour guidelines. And I don't want to lead you guys in the wrong direction. But boom, boom, boom. We start going down, and we're ending up in this central area. And we're getting very exhausted by this time, but we're gonna try and continue. And we make our way into, like, the main street of the Champs Elysees, where you can see the huge arc, and it's nighttime by that point. And we start walking and making our way towards the arc. So I want to show you some pictures of what the tour was like, the kind of blurry of me, but once we got to that point, you can see how kind of dark it was getting at that point. Even though it doesn't get fully dark by it being that night, you can tell that it's really getting towards, like, wee hours of the night, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And that's what it's kind of looking like. And that's when we're on this point of the arc. And then we get it to St. Joseph's Church, which is a spot on the tour that we've had to take a picture and highlight. And I decided to take a nice snapshot of that. And then we just realized that we're not going to be able to finish the whole tour in the night. We don't want the pictures to look kind of gross. So we're like, we're going to resume and we're going to come back. We end the tour for the night and we take a break at the Hotel Bijon, and we make sure to get a snapshot of the Hotel Bijon. And then we continue, we come back to that stop. We make sure to come back the next day. And just to wrap up, because I don't want this video to go into too much length as far as the longevity of it, we're going to beautiful spots to show you some more pictures. We have several pictures that I'm going to make sure to post, but here's a lot of them that I have on my tablet that'll be directly underneath this, the next slides to come. Is we realize that we're looping around and we're making a loop from going up the street of the Champs-Élysées to the big arc, going around that arc and coming back down to where we originally started. And we come back to more and more shops. One of the shops that we specify was where Oprah Winfrey famously thought that she was going to come to Paris and not have to be like regular individuals. And it was the Hermes store, which is kind of hard to see. I tried to capture it as best as I could, and that was one store on the journey that we kind of looked into. And that was just ironic that, in Paris, they don't really care about your wealth. You have to be like kind of every other individual. And then we get the backside of the palace, or not palace, I'm sorry, of the embassy that we kind of started at the beginning. We get the back of that. There's me. And here's another picture of a Asile standing in front of one of the gates as well on the street view. And as we're wrapping that part of the tour up, we conclude by this going to this beautiful um, let me make sure I want to make sure I get the right wording, but we end at a beautiful the Assembly Nationale, so the assembly where Congress meets. We end right there, and that's the Assembly building. But just to show proof, here's a Sile and I at the Assembly building right in front of it. And there's another one of me looking dapper, if I may say so myself. So basically, some general points that I want to say, specify about the tour is the tour was very long. However, one thing that I realized is that the Champs Elysees is a very wealthy area and a place to be in Paris. A lot of that, what made that distinction for me is there is history there too. We have a lot of notable people when we were looking into spots and highlights of the tour where Josephine Baker presided. Um, and I believe she had a place there, and so on and so forth. But the long story short is you have a lot of individuals that we looked at even in history, if that's any indication, and even to the present day that represented affluent and notable individuals here in Paris. And this area goes to show that it's very affluent area. We didn't see that many black people or people of color walking around. And if we did, those were people who were in the local stands because a lot of them are in stands and concession stands that sell food at reasonable prices to tourists and individuals traveling around the area. We saw an increase of police officers. We were traveling on the main street, the street right here, if I can direct your attention, of the Champs-Élysées, the avenue, the famous avenue leading all the way up to the Arc. We saw that there was a lot of high-stakes security and guard dogs to guard these areas, but we don't see the same type of things that I noticed when we're traveling and taking pictures of different areas like the Rosa Parks station towards the 18th arrondissement. You know, it's not something that's there. So just by walking on this tour, some takeaways that I can kind of reflect on is who's guarding the door and who are the keepers of the door. In this area, the keepers of the door are very much white Parisians, and those are the ones that kind of guard the doors that a lot of people want to go in, whether it's shopping doors or even feeling comfortable in that area. They make it so that this is an area where people want to be, which attract a lot of the tourists. And as I said before, thank you for watching this virtual tour. My name is Taryn Chapman. I did this tour with Asile Patton, and as I said before, you will find a lot of the images that show proof of the vibrancy of this tour down below. And thank you.